Hey guys, what is going on? It's me, BikuriBox12 here, and welcome back to another Realm of the Mad God Dungeon Guide video. I would say that this video is long overdue, and it is, but that's nothing new for this channel, so let's move on. Today we're going to be looking at the Cnidarian Reef, a boss dungeon located within the Court of Oryx, an area only accessible after defeating the optional mini-boss of Oryx's castle, Janus the Door Warden. Let's spend a few minutes talking about that before getting into the reef. When you're in Oryx's castle, if you clear out all of the stationary suits of armor in the four main pathways, not to be confused with haunted armors, an area will open up above the stone guardians after they're defeated, and Janus the Door Warden will be resting in the center. With a full realm of people, it's a very easy mini-boss that you can do for a quick potion before Oryx. Usually someone will ask beforehand to make sure that everybody is on board. They'll say something like, "We doing Janus?" and then someone will say, "Nope," and then you gotta clear the whole freaking castle by yourself. But more often than not, if all four paths have players, there will be at least one good Samaritan in each. I like to double check each hallway before everyone gets to the Stone Guardians, just in case, but it's not a huge risk. You can always go back afterwards if you don't care about doing Oryx. When you get to Janus, there will be about 10 seconds of activation before he throws out 8 keys on the ground, 4 keys of light, and 4 keys of darkness, alternating in a square around the room. And you'll need to avoid these 8 points at all costs, because each one of them has 15 armor-piercing shots for 60 damage that come out about every second. So if you happen to be standing where one of them spawns, then you'll be taking 900 points of raw damage, an instant kill for any class that doesn't have some kind of health bonus. You can stand near the bottom left to stay out of range. Janus himself can't even reach you there, but you can hang at the bottom just outside the room for maximum safety. Either way though, those keys will keep on shooting until you've taken them all out, and unfortunately, the standard melee range isn't enough to stay out of reach and attack at the same time. It's basically required to take a few hits if you want to land any of your own. Knights can stun them, which negates that problem, and having a crystal sword will do the trick too. Your best option though would be to bring a ranged character, but in a normal sized group it's not a major concern. Now if you fail to kill any of the keys within these first 10 seconds, they'll be brought in close to Janus for phase 2, where their attack patterns overlap, becoming borderline impossible for melees to dodge, and will also heal him for 2,000 points per key. Now you haven't done any damage to him yet since the fight just started, but later on this can become an issue, especially if you're soloing. If you still aren't able to kill them by now, then they'll sit there for about 8 seconds before returning to their original positions, and the phase will continue as normal. Once they're finally all gone, the ground will flash red in an hourglass shape, letting you know where the waves of boomerang shots will be going. So just play a little reverse Simon Says, and this will be your chance to get some damage in. The ground will start flashing again under your feet before the attack is done, letting you know where it's gonna go next, but you don't have to worry about moving until the very last row of boomerangs come back. As long as you take that precaution, you can get pretty close. And the shots only do 50 damage anyway, so it's not a huge loss if you make a mistake. After 2 rotations of that, it'll go right back to phase 1. Only this time, after summoning the keys again, they'll fly in close to Janus for only a couple seconds, and then fly back out. Overall, when clearing the keys, I start with the one on the bottom left, and work my way counterclockwise to the 2 directly above. That way, when the hourglass phase starts, I'm on the left side of the room, so that when it finishes, I'm right back to the bottom left corner to start over again if necessary. Keep in mind though, in your typical run, you usually have enough firepower to finish it off in one go. When you've worn him down low enough to about 10,000 HP, he'll enter a small rage phase, moving around the room erratically and spawning more keys over time. Once again, melees have quite the difficult time avoiding damage since you can't predict where he's going to move next, but it can be done. It's a battle of quickly thrusting in at the right time and taking the appropriate shot when he happens to wobble over to you. Now, if you're one of the unlucky ones, like I was, right as you bring him to that rage phase, he'll also throw out the 8 keys again to restart phase 1 at the same time. And it looks a little something like, "Oh my goodness!" I just so happened to ignite this atrocity when I was recording, and I forgot this could even happen. If you're on a melee like I was, good lord, if you don't have a good pet, you'd be better off nexusing. A ranged class would have a much easier time clearing out the keys, but you need to get out of that room ASAP. There's no telling what chaos will ensue if you stick around in there. I was able to do it, but without proper regeneration, I don't think I would have had the patience for it, and to be perfectly honest, it's not worth your time. Doing it normally is infinitely more tame by comparison. It's still tricky for melees not to get hit, don't get me wrong, but only dealing with 1 or 2 keys at a time is very manageable. When his last drop of health is depleted, he returns to the center of the room, the keys despawn, and the chest appears to his side. The loot table is as follows, with the only notable drops being attack, defense, vitality, and the potential spiteful Scutum white bag shield, which is Pretty good? I'm not quite sure, I don't have one. But what you'll notice is that Janus leaves behind the Court of Oryx portal, taking you to a small, oblong room where we get to meet Craig, the intern of the Mad God. I don't get it either. He says some things, you tell him to skip, he gets mad, and then 4 dungeon portals, at least at the time of this video, will be opened, and you can choose whichever one you want to go into. And the one that we're concerning ourselves with today is the Cnidarian Reef. Let's get into it. The first thing to note about Court of Oryx dungeons is that they aren't actually full-fledged dungeons, but instead contain solely a boss fight. In this case, we have the Royal Cnidarian resting in the middle of our second underwater-themed area in the game, with a beautiful coral reef surrounding the perimeter and air pockets surrounding the boss. Now, if you've done the ocean trench, then you should already know how this works. You have an air meter below your character. The longer you stay underwater, the more it drains. If you run out, the screen turns red and you begin rapidly losing health, and you can only regain oxygen by standing on air bubbles. Unlike the trench, however, you can only hold your breath for about 10 seconds here, which naturally makes suffocation a significantly more prominent issue. What makes the reef so unique, though, is the placement of the air bubbles. You gotta get right next to Jerry the jellyfish over here if you want to stay alive.
Touch. Don't touch.
But you're simultaneously putting yourself at a higher risk for damage by being so close, putting you in this almost claustrophobic middle ground where you can't move too far in any given direction, and instead have to balance and maintain your position. Large groups can still dominate the fight, sure, but when soloing, I was really able to appreciate the effort that went into each phase, and the distinct vision of difficulty that they had. You have about 20 seconds after entering the portal to compose yourself and get familiar with the room. After that, the Royal Cnidarian will send out a bunch of multicolored jellyfish around the room, and begin firing 100 damage daze rings that conveniently pass right over each air bubble, so you can't just camp on top of them. While each jellyfish has its own behavior, it's the golden Cnidarian that you want to keep your eye on, because you'll need to destroy it to push the boss out of vulnerability and into the next phase. The first time through is pretty easy. There's only one of them and it moves very slow. You have plenty of time to identify its location and kill it before air becomes an issue. As the fight continues though, you'll see why the other jellyfish will pose more of a threat. The blue Cnidarian causing sick with 80 damage, one of the more deadly ones, green slowing you for 100 damage, and pink, the deadliest of all, with 125 damage shots and a 100 damage AoE attack. Put several of these back to back when you're trying to single out the golden ones and dodge the boss while still keeping your oxygen at bay, and you can see how the difficulty can sneak up on you. The one saving grace is that they all have a few seconds of cooldown in between attacks, so you can use these moments to create an opening for yourself. Once that first Cnidarian is taken care of, you move on to phase 2, and this one took me a while to find the rhythm for, but there is a way to time it right if you follow my movements. You have a few seconds to hurry back and regain some oxygen, but be prepared to move out of the way of the triple oval shot. You'll see these bullets a lot throughout the fight, and they're the most dangerous because of their 175 armor-piercing damage. You'll also need to keep moving from the Royal Cnidarian's close proximity lightning bolt, that graciously does no damage, but inflicts a half-second paralysis, which can cause you to collide with additional projectiles. So long as you're always on the move though, or out of reach, it's a non-issue. It doesn't travel any further than the air bubbles, so if there's room to back up, you have the option. Although that opportunity rarely presents itself here. The Cnidarians around the border of the room now move in a little bit closer than before and have a much more focused plan of attack. About 70% of the time, there's at least one Cnidarian behind you that doesn't give you any room to back up past the air pockets. You're essentially forced to maintain your distance between the Royal Cnidarian and the multicolored ones behind you. On one hand, this is good because you'll always have access to air, but there's also this insane precision being asked of you. The real kicker here though, and the part that makes this phase so difficult, are the wide wave-like attacks that spread out. No matter where you are, these will keep fanning out relative to your position. Ideally, to not take any damage here, you'll find that perpetually circling the boss is the best tactic. But how you circle it is important. It's not something that can be done mindlessly. If you stand still waiting for the boss to make the first move, you're already at a disadvantage. Your only option would be to either back up if you can, or squeeze in between the small grooves, which I'm not very good at. But if you keep on the move at all times, then those 3 shots will go right past you. And with 50 speed, the wave shot will follow suit, placing you right in that little safe spot. Immediately after this, start counting to 3 in your head while you move around. 1, 2, 3. If done right, you should cross over about 4 air bubbles worth of space and end up being positioned to the side of the wave shot. And you'll do this 4 times in a row. 1, 2, 3, move. 1, 2, 3, move. 1, 2, 3, move. 1, 2, 3. Not saying it's a foolproof way of not taking damage, I still make plenty of mistakes, but it is the best method I've found, and I think once you give it a shot and fine-tune it to your own liking, you'll see that it does work rather well. The colored Cnidarians will then be brought in right next to the boss, but rather than shooting, they simply act as a means to body block your shots, a big reason why piercing weapons are often preferred. The Royal Cnidarian's attacks will also switch over to a large single wave that you can easily dodge if you keep rotating. This part of the phase lasts for about 7 seconds before reverting back to the first half, and it'll continue alternating between these two until you bring the boss to roughly half health. Once that's done, get ready to move away from the 5-shot oval attack. The dazed shots are back as well, and this time, you have 3 golden Cnidarians to finish off. This time, however, when you attack them, they speed up to try and run away, so you'll most likely need to stop for air this time around. When trying to gather air, I bait out the 5-shot attack and wait for the daze bubbles to pass and grab a quick breath. It doesn't take more than a couple seconds to refill your air back to full, although it may be more efficient to simply tank one of the daze shots and get your air all in one spot. It's up to you. We then enter phase 4, which I feel is the most exciting of the bunch. The oval shots will come out in a 5-point star pattern like streams and rotate clockwise around the room. The daze shots will be back and the swarm of Cnidarians behind you will begin their close quarters attack once more. So just like in phase 2, you have to maintain the same distance throughout. Only here you have a very tricky maneuver to pull off when crossing the air pockets. Since you have this daze shot coming at all times, you can't sit directly on the pocket. However, by standing very close to it, edging the corner, you can avoid damage and still receive your air. Once you're in this position, you can stay here until the tentacle to your right gets almost uncomfortably close, and then cross over to the other side when the coast is clear. And let me tell you, when you get that perfect timing, it feels incredible. Visually speaking, your senses can get pretty overloaded with how much is going on here, but when you break it down into simple parts, it actually becomes pretty easy. It's just all a matter of getting that perfect timing. Remember, if you have to take a hit from anything, make it the daze shot. Just make sure you're doing damage the whole time. You wouldn't want to have to be there any longer than necessary. When enough damage is done, you'll push the boss into its penultimate phase where we have 5 golden Cnidarians, only this time they have an ink blast attack that blinds you. Other than that though, it's the same deal as before, just a bit harder and a bit longer. In its final phase, when you bring its health down low enough, the whole reef turns against you, and I'll be honest, I think it's pretty fun. All the little Cnidarians finally become vulnerable so you can clear them out. They even have their own potential potion drops: gold dropping defense, blue wisdom, green speed, and pink vitality, although none of those seem too common from what I've seen. The Royal Cnidarian will continue spawning them over time as well, but more importantly, it gives chase to you with a very wide, close-range wave and occasional rapid-fire lightning attacks, which can prove fatal given the wrong circumstances. All you need to do is lure the boss around the room and try to create some space between you two. That way you can stop for air and have some time before it catches up. In the case that you're on a melee like me, you'll be doing a lot of rotating left and right to bait its shots the other way to create the opening. Meanwhile, the surrounding minions will alternate between either flocking towards the boss or spreading out to fire like normal. When they're all grouped up, it's really easy to circle them, and again, lends itself quite well to items that pierce. The knight is my preferred melee to bring for that reason alone, even if most things are stun immune. When they spread out though, that's when you have to lure it around, and make sure you don't back up into a bunch of the Cnidarians. I feel that melees in general are a good pick to bring since you have to stand so close to the boss regardless of your range. So you may as well bring a class with high health, defense, and vitality. But then again, piercing classes like Archer, Huntress, Ninja, Samurai, and technically Priest and Sorcerer too, do come with their own advantages. Mystics can also really help out by stasising all of the colored Cnidarians and singling out the golden ones, which just so happen to conveniently be immune to stasis. The only other thing to mention is the big weaken grenade that gets thrown around. They shouldn't give you any more trouble than the rest of the attacks, but it's an extra thing to watch out for. When it's all taken care of, you're given a blue potion bag with an attack and defense, a rather tame reward for what you went through, but at the same time, that's sort of par for the course with these bosses. The white bag contains 2 items, one being the bottled Medusazoan, a pretty cool poison for the assassin, and the Cnidaria rod, a not so practical scepter for the sorcerer, but I'm sure it has its moments. And that's all for the Cnidarian Reef. It's a boss that is significantly more enjoyable and challenging to fight when in small numbers, as opposed to a large group who can tank and heal their way through most of it. Then again, that's just kind of how it goes these days. You can't expect every dungeon boss to be able to accommodate for anywhere from 30 to 60 people at a time. That's just not realistic. But from the perspective of how it was meant to be played, I think this is an excellent fight. I know a lot of bosses are hopping on that trend of having an artifact circle around the room that you have to kill to make the boss vulnerable again. Marble Colossus, El Dorado, heck, even Janus. And it seems like everything has a tentacle phase now, but it still has its own style here and doesn't feel like it's copying off of something else. I think this is a top-notch boss fight, and much like everything else in the game, I didn't realize how much I liked it until I got better at it. With that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. And as always, don't forget to check out the next episode whenever I post it, which will probably be soon. Alright. See ya.